The Philadelphia Eagles were pretty quiet on the first day of NFL free agency. I think that's a good thing, and I'm going to tell you why coming up on this Tuesday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day, whether you're listening in Philadelphia, Los Angeles, Scotland, across the globe. We thank you so much for making us a part of your Monday through Friday. We are recapping a crazy first day of NFL free agency on Monday for the Philadelphia Eagles. Nothing too crazy. They were pretty quiet outside of a quarterback for quarterback trade that we'll get into later on in the show. But everything that happened with the Eagles yesterday were departures, not signings. So we all know now that Milton Williams signed a bag in New England. A long-term contract worth $26 million a year. There was actually a bidding war for Milton between the Carolina Panthers, who we originally thought had signed him in the afternoon. Then the New England Patriots gave him an offer that he could not refuse. Milton Williams now making $26 million a year with the Patriots. We know that Josh Sweat signed a $19 million a year contract to reunite with Jonathan Gannon and the Arizona Cardinals. Darius Slay, we'll see what's going on with that. Technically, he has still not been released. The Eagles gave him permission to speak with other teams, though. It sounds like they intend to release him with that post-June 1st designation to free up $4 million in cap space. It sounds like, verbally at least, he may have agreed to a contract with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And then Isaiah Rodgers signed a 2-year contract to go start with the Minnesota Vikings. Overall, I didn't really see a crazy amount of panic with Eagles fans. I think sometimes the media will create panic to have talking points. Why are you all freaking out? And there is really nobody freaking out. But if there were people, if there are listeners out there that are kind of nervous about the Eagles' quiet approach to the first day of free agency, if you're a little bit nervous about seeing 4 key players of that defense from 2024 walk out the door and Sweat, Williams, Rodgers, and Slay, I'm here to tell you that it's fine. It's not a big deal, and this was all expected. I think on every single podcast that I did, even if I entertain the idea of Milton Williams coming back, or even yesterday's show saying that there's a better chance that Josh Sweat could return to Philadelphia considering the oversaturated edge market that blew up yesterday. There were so many players that were signed in the open market. At the same time, I still knew the competition, the age of Josh Sweat, the premier position that he played. It wasn't likely he was going to be back. I mean, those guys, again, they made $45 million a year combined with new contracts, Milton Williams and Josh Sweat. We knew the Eagles were not going to be able to compete with that. And for Josh Sweat, I don't know if he's worth $19 million a year. Milton Williams, I think, is an elite pass rushing defensive tackle in his prime. But is he a $26 million a year player without Jalen Carter? I'm not so sure. Yes, I would have liked the Philadelphia Eagles to be in on some of the action yesterday. I thought that Malcolm Kuntz contract is exactly what I thought they should be looking for. He re-signed with the Raiders for a 1-year deal worth $12 million. A nice prove-it deal. Coming off an injury, I thought, boom, that's what I'm looking for. Darrell Taylor went to the Houston Texans for only, I think, $5.5 million on a 1-year contract to rotate through with Hunter and Anderson. I thought that's something that would have been interesting. I would have liked to re-sign Isaiah Rodgers to compete with Kelee Ringo this year. But again, Howie Roseman told you at the Combine, be patient. We have seen this before in off seasons after the Eagles win a Super Bowl. The league comes for championship rosters. They want to pick from your roster, and a lot of the times they're going to overpay for the players that helped you win a championship. And being quiet in a free agent class that wasn't really seen consensus as a really strong class, I don't think is a bad thing. Howie Roseman doing what he did last year, banking on young players that showed promise to continue to develop, banking on his draft classes, I think it shows growth actually from Howie, because there's been years past where he couldn't stomach not being in on the activity. He couldn't stomach watching players from his championship roster walk out the door in 2017. In 2022, I think it's different. I think he went a little bit too far with letting guys go at positions he normally doesn't care about when he didn't have replacement options. But when you look at who he let go this year, he has replacement options ready to go. Yeah, is Moro Ojomo instantly going to be what Milton Williams was last year next to Jalen Carter? Probably not. But Moro Ojomo is only heading into year 3 and was having a breakout season last year when he was on the field. He was top 15 among all defensive tackles in pass rush win rate. And again, that shows Jalen Carter's impact. But Moro Ojomo is somebody that's been waiting in the wings. I think he could be ready to go. The Eagles are banking on that. Jordan Davis's progress as a pass rusher, and the fact that this draft class has a ton of interesting defensive tackle options. He's banking on that youth through the draft and through his current roster. And I like that how he's doing that now, because in years past, he would bring in a Band-Aid signing, a veteran, a 1 or 2 year contract for a player just to fill a hole immediately. I don't everybody says don't draft for need. I don't always like to go spend money for need in free agency. Sometimes I think that's more irresponsible than filling a need with a long-term rookie contract type of player. That's why I've always said I actually like to draft for need, because if you hit on that immediate need, you now have a long-term cost-controlled contract in that spot, and you don't have to worry about it for years to come. So I like this approach. I like that even though Josh Sweat's out the door, they're banking on Jalyx Hunt to take that next step, to take that Nolan Smith-like step. They're banking on Nolan Smith to take an even bigger step than his year 2 breakout in 2024. They're banking on this really deep draft class will bring them another really solid player. I think they're banking on Bryce Huff more than maybe we're giving that credit for, because they didn't. Again, they could still do something today. They could still do something all week, and they will. It's not like they're not going to sign any free agents on the edge at defensive tackle. I think that'll happen today. At the cornerback position, now that Rodgers is gone, I think they'll bring in some competition for Kelee Ringo. But I like that Howie has seen in the past that sometimes he has stunted growth of young players because he's brought in these short-term stopgap types. And I'm not saying that every free agent is that. Like Malcolm Kuntz is a 26-year-old player that could have grown and been a core piece of this defense. Like I think those type of moves make sense. But I like that he sees the long-term pieces on his roster that have shown promise, and he's going to let those guys continue to grow, because that was a main reason the defense last year had a historic turnaround from a bottom-tier defense to the number 1 defense in football that shut down one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time to win a Super Bowl. Like banking on youth, banking on a projection, and just glimpses of promise, like taking that risk, but like believing in your investments is a huge reason how he won a championship. So I like that he potentially believes in Moro Ojomo and Kelee Ringo to fill the void of Slay and Rodgers, and Jeremiah Trotter Jr. to fill in while Nakobe Dean's out instead of Oren Burks, who also left yesterday for a short-term deal with the Cincinnati Bengals. Like I like that if Mekhi Becton leaves today or tomorrow, that they believe in Tyler Steen. Again, in 2023, I thought they went too far with letting guys leave because it was at positions that they didn't have talent and they really didn't have any sort of long-term solutions. And there are positions that Howie continuously ignores, right? It was safety, letting Chauncey Gardner-Johnson go, and Marcus Epps. It was the linebacker position, letting TJ Edwards go and Kazir White. I didn't really trust that Howie was going to take those positions seriously to fill those voids. Who did you lose yesterday? You lost defensive linemen. You might potentially lose an offensive lineman today or tomorrow. You don't think Howie Roseman's going to make moves? Like he's going to just find stopgap bridge players at these positions that he cares so much about? Like he is going to add more, whether it's through free agency, through a trade, through the draft, or all three. Like he's going to add more players. But I do like that he's believing in his young guys because he does have players that can fill these voids. Maybe not to the extreme level of those guys from 2024, but eventually long-term, they will fill those voids. And I like that. I like that they weren't super loud yesterday throwing a ton of money at some overrated players. Again, there were some guys I wanted the Eagles to be in on, and maybe they were, but them not doing anything yesterday was not making me panic. Them losing Sweat and Milton Williams is not making me panic. This is still the best roster in football that has very little holes. Everyone that left yesterday, is there like, again, after 2023, when the safeties and linebackers left, we're like, okay, there are now some massive holes on your starting lineup. I don't think that's the case with the defense. Maybe they downgraded a little bit in certain spots. There's still time to upgrade, though, and it's not like there's this gaping hole still. this is still, to me, the most complete roster in the NFL. And like I said, there's still more work to be done. What could Howie Roseman do today on day 2 of free agency where players can officially sign contracts? We'll get into that coming up next, right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. This episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. Taking care of your mental health can feel like a big investment, but it's just as important as taking care of your body. Traditional in-person therapy can cost anywhere from $100 to $250 per session, but with BetterHelp, you can save up to 50% per session. BetterHelp offers a flat fee of weekly online therapy sessions, making professional support more accessible and affordable. With over 30,000 therapists and over 5 million people helped, it's the world's largest online therapy platform. We spend money on, gym memberships and healthy food. Why not invest in your mental well-being as well? Therapy isn't just for tough times. It's a great tool for learning coping skills and setting boundaries, which has been a big thing for me in 2024 and 2025. Your well-being is worth it. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today. You're going to get 10% off your first month of online therapy. Again, BetterHelp.com. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Thanks as always for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Day 1 of free agency is in the books. What a wild day it was for tampering day. X shut down for the majority of the day. I actually had to go on Blue Sky. So if you're a Blue Sky user, you can now follow me at DiBiase LOE. I'm going to be on there actually posting stuff pretty consistently. I'm going to stay over there just in case, because I feel like X is going to continue to shut down as the year goes on. But that was a crazy part of the day. The Eagles lost a good amount of their 2024 defense. Darius Slay agreeing to a verbal contract with the Pittsburgh Steelers, Isaiah Rodgers to the Minnesota Vikings, Josh Sweat to the Arizona Cardinals, reuniting with Jonathan Gannon, and then Milton Williams signing a huge deal. Shout out to Milton Williams, though. I mean, that guy was incredible last year, especially in the Super Bowl. $26 million a year. Again, the Eagles couldn't compete with that, but go get your bag, sir. And same with Josh Sweat. The Eagles got 7 really good years out of Josh Sweat. He was everything that Todd McShay said he would be in the 4th round of that 2018 draft when he said, I always remember when the Eagles took him, he said Josh Sweat's going to be the steal of this draft, and I think he was the steal of that draft. I mean, he was, to me, outside of Brandon Graham, your most consistent edge rusher throughout that near decade. I feel old that Josh Sweat almost played in Philadelphia for a decade, but like you had some huge years with Hassan Reddick and some strong years with like a Michael Bennett, and Derek Barnett was consistent, and you had Brandon Graham, of course. But Josh Sweat was always just that steady guy. You knew you were getting 7 to 10 sacks a year. And, again, props to them. Go get your bag. You helped the Eagles win a championship. It's hard for me to be super upset, especially, again, because like I said, there are still options out there, and you have a lot of young players that are ready to take those next steps. There's been so many years where the Eagles stunted a young player's growth. Like my guy, Rasul Douglas, like he would show promise in 2017, and then Darby or Mills would come back into the lineup. He would show promise at the end of the 2018 season. And then here comes Darby and Mills again. Like the Eagles, Jim Schwartz used to stunt Rasul Douglas' growth of a lot. And then he went over to Green Bay and Buffalo, and he became one of the best playmaking corners in the NFL. You look at Miles Sanders wasn't given a chance really to make a huge impact the first half of 2019 with guys like Jordan Howard and Darren Sproles in the way. And then he was given that chance to be the guy at the end of 2019, and he carried you to a division title with Carson Wentz. Like you look at Travis Fulgham. I know Travis Fulgham wasn't going to be anything. It's the Jeremy Lin of the NFL. But he was having a huge year in 2020. And then when Alshon Jeffrey came back, they just threw him back in the lineup, and Fulgham just disappeared. Like you had no idea what you were going to continue to get out of that player. I just think, and then like Nolan Smith last year. Nolan Smith was a player that really didn't get a lot of chances to play. And Howie Roseman said, after seeing how good he was in that Tampa wildcard game, maybe we need to start playing our young guys more. And even though they're not a proven player, we need to bank on our projection of this guy and give them a chance to grow on the field. Banking on that youth, again, young doesn't mean worse. Inexperience doesn't always mean worse. And the Eagles saw that up close last year, and it's why this year I think they're going to be more willing to give Jalyx Hunt the benefit of the doubt, Moro Ojomo the benefit of the doubt, Kelee Ringo the benefit of the doubt. I think yesterday showed, another big takeaway from yesterday, The Eagles believe in Kelee Ringo a lot more than maybe some thought, including me. I thought because Isaiah Rodgers played over him last year when Darius Slay would go down, that maybe Vic Fangio is not a huge fan of Kelee Ringo's style. I love it. I mean, he's younger than Quinyon Mitchell. He's, 22, 23 years old. I like that long, physical press coverage corner that has like a 4.3 long-range speed. Is he the twitchiest player laterally? No. But neither is Cooper DeJean, and that didn't hurt him last year. Like, Ringo has a lot of awesome traits that I like, and I think the Eagles do too. And that's why I think they're comfortable letting Slay and Rodgers go. I think they're going to give Kelee Ringo a legitimate chance to start in 2024. And that makes sense. You got to let these guys play. You gave up a future third-round pick for Kelee Ringo 2 years ago. And I think he showed a lot of promise at the end of 2023. He was their best corner down the stretch heading into the playoffs. And this year, I thought he grew tremendously in the physicality department as a tackler, as a gunner on special teams. Like, he has all the traits to be a third corner in this defense because you have Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean as well. You're going to have to pay those guys. I don't know if you can afford to go spend big money on another corner. But let's say they do want to bring in some competition for Ringo. Who is out there? Let's say they don't believe in Ringo as a starter, not just competition, but they want to make a splash move at corner. Who could be out there? There are 3 guys that I really like that you guys know I like because I've talked about on the show before. I've talked about certain players for months during a draft process, for years when they were with the Eagles. 3 guys that it would interest me the most. If it's not Kelee Ringo, that's the guy. And again, you could still maybe bring back Slay. We'll see what happens with that situation. But I like Rasul Douglas is still in the open market. I think you should bring him back. He makes a lot more sense in Vic Fangio's defense than he did in Jim Schwartz's defense. He's 30 years old, but maybe you can sign him to a 2-3 year contract. Maybe a short-term prove-it deal because he didn't have the best year in Buffalo last year. Maybe his market's not as strong as he thought, and he comes back to Philadelphia and kind of banks on himself. Asante Samuel Jr. Is he the best tackler in the world? No. Is he a physical press coverage corner? No. But in Vic Fangio's defense, where there's a lot of off coverage anyway, soft press, mirroring, which Asante's really good at, having that safety behind him, Asante Samuel Jr. And it's just a cool story. How awesome would it be to have Asante Samuel Jr. wearing number 22 next year and Jeremiah Trotter Jr. is wearing number 54 on the field, both wearing their dad's legendary Eagles jerseys? That would be pretty cool. And Asante, again, a player coming off an injury, maybe he's not as expensive as you think, and he's got that speed. He is a twitchy, like on your butt, like glue, shadowing a receiver type of corner. And he'll have to grow as a tackler for sure for the Eagles to trust him. But the Eagles know that kind of guy. They knew how his dad was, and they have good tacklers on the second level with their other 4 starters. So Asante is somebody that intrigues me. Yes, again, he's got his flaws, but his best trait as a corner is covering, and that's the most important part of it. So I think at a certain price, Asante would intrigue me. And then I like the idea of Christian Fulton. That was my guy for me in that 2020 draft coming out of LSU. He had a career year last year with the Chargers. This would more be an option and I think Fulton could still play on the outside, but if they are intrigued by the idea of putting Cooper DeJean on the outside, which you guys know I'm not a fan of. I want him to be on the boundary, or I should say in the slot. That's where his potential to me can be maximized the most. But if they want to move Cooper DeJean to the boundary, I could see Christian Fulton being an interesting slot option. So those are 3 guys that if the Eagles want to bring in competition for Kelee Ringo, they want to bring in a different starter because they just don't think Ringo is that guy. Asante Samuel Jr., Rasul Douglas, Christian Fulton. I think those are 3 of the best players that are on the open market. They'll probably draft a corner maybe earlier than we think. But I personally, again, like those are some options I like. And I think they probably will draft a player. And you need to anyway for depth. Right now, you only have outside of the top 3. You've got Eli Ricks and not much more. Because Avonte Maddox is also a free agent outside of just Slay and Rodgers departing. But for me, I like Ringo. I think he's ready to go. I think you should give him the chance that you gave all these other young players because they all made it work. They all developed and panned out, and why not give Ringo that chance? It's not like if he would have showed no promise, it'd be a different story. But again, if you go back and watch the tape of 2023, and there's some guys that have posted it on YouTube, if you look back at some of Ringo's highlights this year, I think he's ready. I think he's ready, so I'm confident in that. Any other moves to expect this week? Again, I think they'll add depth on the defensive line. I think a guy like Azeez Ojulari could make some sense on the edge as a specialty pass rusher to be that third or fourth guy. Outside of that, though, the edge group has been picked pretty clean. Maybe Joey Bosa. I just don't think he has much left in him, and he gets injured all the time. I think at defensive tackle, Draymond Jones is still a name to consider. He will not count against the comp pick formula as he was released this week by the Seahawks, played for Vic Fangio, still a young player, a solid 4 to 5 sack a year guy. That could be a good player in that rotation next to Jalen Carter at defensive tackle. Draymond Jones would make some sense. There are still some options out there that I like in free agency. And then we'll see the Mekhi Becton of it all. We'll see what that market looks like. The guard market yesterday wasn't as expensive as I said it would be on Monday. I thought after hearing some reports from CBS that the guard market was going to blow up. I mean, yesterday you saw guys, good starters that are on Becton's level go for 11 to $14 million a year. If Becton wants to take the lower end of that range to come back to Philly, I still think it's possible, but we'll see what happens. That's like the next big shoe to drop for the Eagles. Howie did do one thing yesterday. He made a trade. Trader Howie was back during free agency, a quarterback for quarterback swap, and I'm going to tell you why I really like this move coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. This episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast is brought to you by TurboTax. Taxes were waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back, and then waiting, wondering, and worrying some more. Now Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. Also, you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now this is Taxes. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service. Real-time updates only in iOS mobile apps. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. All right, so we know Howie Roseman can't stay quiet all day when the NFL is making moves. Like, he gets FOMO, fear of missing out. He's got to get in on the action. He didn't get in on the free agent action, but he did get in on the trading market. Howie Roseman yesterday traded Kenny Pickett to the Cleveland Browns for quarterback Dorian Thompson-Robinson and a 5th-round draft pick in 2025. I really like this move. Yes, in a vacuum, is Kenny Pickett a better player than DTR? Of course. But there are two main takeaways for me from this trade. Number one, Kenny Pickett might be better than DTR, but Tanner McKee is better than both of these guys. Tanner McKee has proven the last 2 preseasons, in the regular season yesterday, last year, where he was really good against the Cowboys, coming in for Pickett in the second half of that game. He was really good against the Giants. He is a tall player with a huge arm. Does he fit the scheme? Does he perfectly replace Jalen Hurts stylistically? No. But that's my other takeaway is now you have a player like that. If Jalen Hurts goes down, style does matter in this offense. The Eagles are so dependent on having that extra body in the run game that you play 12 on 10 pretty much, having a mobile quarterback. And when Jalen Hurts goes down and you have to play a Pickett or a McKee, sometimes it's tough to keep that going. Having a guy like DTR that even if you start McKee, if Hurts gets hurt, you can have in certain packages as a mobile quarterback. I think that makes a lot of sense. Like, I think you always want to have a second mobile quarterback in this offense along with Jalen Hurts. So DTR is not the passer of Kenny Pickett. He's not that caliber of player, but he still has a lot of upside. He's young. The Eagles liked him coming out of UCLA a few years ago. He was one of their top 30 visits, which is always something you should pay close attention to because a lot of the times the Eagles bring those players in even if they don't draft them originally. I like having, again, style of backup quarterback is important with Jalen Hurts running this offense. I like having a mobile quarterback in this system. And again, Tanner McKee might not be that mobile player, but he is ready to be QB2. Like, you invested. This is why it was annoying to me that they kept bringing in like Marcus Mariota and, they had Gardner Minshew and they had Kenny Pickett. Again, Kenny Pickett was good, and I thought it was awesome to see him literally live all of our childhood dreams of being an Eagles quarterback that wins a Super Bowl, right? I mean, it's incredible. He helped them clinch the division by beating the Cowboys wearing Kelly green, and then he took the last snap for the Eagles to win the Super Bowl. That's literally all of our dreams. Like, that's so cool. And he was good last year for the Eagles. But the reason you draft Tanner McKee in the first place in the late rounds is so you have a cheap, inexpensive, high-quality backup quarterback that you can have for 4 years. And I don't feel like they gave McKee that fair chance, even though he earned it over these last 2 years. It's good to see that they are giving him that opportunity in year 3 because I think he is ready to go to be QB2. And I like bringing in DTR because now, again, you have that backup quarterback that has that mobility. So even if McKee's QB2, if Hurts goes down, you can have certain packages where DTR comes onto the field to, again, have that kind of 12-on-10 element in the run game. So I like it. Yeah, you downgraded a little bit in the trade itself, player for player, but I think you upgraded your quarterback 2 spot with Tanner McKee. You brought in a mobile quarterback, which is important, and you collected a 5th-round draft pick. The Eagles now have, I believe, 3, don't quote me on that, 3 or 4 5th-round picks this year, which can help you move up, can help you trade for future picks in 2026, which might be a stronger class in certain positions. It could help you trade for veteran players. Again, I love when Howie Roseman collects draft picks because it gives him that optionality of being both aggressive, but also having the quantity of picks to build your core with long-term pieces through the draft. Again, you can kind of have your cake and eat it too. Having a lot of draft picks helped you build this championship winner. So I like this approach, and again, I think you upgraded your quarterback 2 spot. So overall, I think this is a 10 out of 10 trade. Tip of the cap to Kenny Pickett. Again, he lived our childhood dream as Eagles fans, but I think this move makes a ton of sense for Philadelphia. All right, guys, that's going to do it for today's edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast. Thanks so much for making us your first listen each and every day. Going to stop recording now just in case the Eagles make some moves, and we've got more to talk about for you on our next show. Thanks so much for downloading, watching, and listening, and let's go Birds. Fly, Eagles, fly.